What a special moment. We're so fortunate that we deal in so many significant cars and collections that sometimes it's easy to get blasé about new projects. However, this has something that's a little bit extra special. It's just past midnight. We are at the Bahrain International Circuit, and behind us, I'm about to talk about the Mansour Ojjeh Collection, a collection that we have just been entrusted with the sale of, and a collection that seriously excites me. But before we talk about the cars, let's touch on Mansour Ojjeh a little bit. Who was Mansour? Mansour was a very special individual. A very successful man who was involved in Formula One since the late 1970s. He was first involved in Formula One with Williams, then later joined McLaren and bought 60% of McLaren in the early 1980s. He was the inspiration, he was the visionary behind that Porsche TAG turbo engine. TAG being Mansour's company, and it was an engine that he worked on for so many years to develop and was initially planned to go into the Williams Formula One car, but then actually went into the McLaren car and won championships for McLaren with both Niki Lauda and with Alain Prost. Now, Mansour was a really special man, and you got that feeling as soon as you met him. I was fortunate enough to meet him on a few occasions, and you immediately get the sense of his charm, his kindness, his articulation, his appreciation definitely for the finer things in life, and his collection absolutely reflects that. He was certainly one of the most well-loved individuals to ever grace Formula One. He had a very close relationship with all of his drivers, including Ayrton Senna, including Mika Hakkinen, including Lewis Hamilton, who remains very close to his family today. But unfortunately, we lost Mansour a few years ago, and this collection has now been entrusted to us by his family, and what a collection it is. The theme of the collection, of all these cars that you see behind me, is that they are all the last of their models. Where do we start? The story starts with the jewel of the collection, with the McLaren F1. This is the last F1 road car ever produced, chassis number 75. It was initially delivered to Mansour's brother. However, when Mansour found out that he was going to be selling the car, he went absolutely bonkers and said, "You can't do that. That was the last car that we ever built. If you're selling it, I'm going to buy it." Now, Mansour had already at that time owned an F1, and he decided to buy another one, which was this car. And then deciding obviously which one was the most important, he got rid of his own car and kept this particular example. Now, this example isn't just the last one that was ever built. This is totally unique. The color, there was never another car that was built in this color. Now, the color is called Yquem, after that very famous and very expensive dessert wine. And all of the other cars within this collection, although they are identical to Yquem, MSO renamed the color, and they called it Mansour Orange, and no other client was allowed to order his car in Mansour Orange, even though they had gazillions of requests over the years. Going back to the F1, 1,800 kilometers from new, one of the lowest mileage examples in existence. We've got to take a closer look at it. It was actually born exactly as it is today. So in this paintwork, in this interior, the car has these Daytona style seats for all you Ferrariists out there. It's got black leather Daytona style seats with orange inserts on the driver's seat. It was specified with a wooden gear knob and a wooden handbrake lever. Other special features of this car included, it's got 2 steering wheels, one which is the traditional round steering wheel, which is what's fitted to the car today, and it also has a flat bottom steering wheel. Now, we haven't taken the dash off, but I am told that everyone that worked on the project has also signed this car behind the dash. It really doesn't get much more special than this. We've sold several F1s over the years and several incredible F1s over the years, but there is no F1 road car that I would like to sell, like to handle, like to be entrusted with more than this car. You know, it's a car that I would love to be the buyer of it. This is the car that inspired the rest of the collection because it was the last one built, because it was born in that color. Mansour, you know, being one of the major shareholders of McLaren throughout the years, he then put a request into everyone else and said, you know what I want? I want the last car from each model that I want to buy. I want the last chassis number. And in so many of these cars, you'll see plaques of every one of them saying that this is the last one that was built and this was specially built for Mansour Ojjeh. Mansour, how loved of a guy he was, and you know, it's quite fitting that we have the Royal Tower lit up behind us, and if you look closely, you'll see Mansour's logo revolving around the tower. That logo was used at the French Grand Prix by McLaren on their Formula One cars not long after Mansour's passing. And then the family had a really special request to McLaren, something that I don't think I've ever seen from any manufacturer on any car in the world. They asked if they could use that logo on the Elva. McLaren said, okay, we can use it somewhere. Yeah, we'll find a place to use it. And then McLaren, as a gesture to the family, decided to build this Elva, and it has got no McLaren badges on it anywhere. When you look at the badge that's on the front, it states Mansour. And when you come to the rear and you're looking for the traditional McLaren badge, it states Mansour Elva. Inside the car, you'll see a special plaque, and it states the last McLaren Elva built in September 2022, exclusive commission for Mansour Ojjeh. How special is that? Now, obviously they didn't build many of these cars. I think there was 148 or 149 Elvas built in total. There is not one that looks like that. And there's definitely not another McLaren in the world, and I don't know of any other manufacturer in the world that have built a car and don't actually have their own badge on it. So that's a very special car for someone. I don't even know where to start actually. Do we go left or do we go right? I don't think I'm going to be able to get around all of these cars on one take and do all of these cars justice, but we're going to have a bit of a go. McLaren P1. I love P1s. These cars, I think, have such a good future ahead of them because for me, they're a true successor of an F1. They're a fantastic car, fantastic chassis, part of the Holy Trinity, rarer than a 918 Spider, rarer than a LaFerrari, better driver's car than both of them. And, you know, I'm sorry, Ferrari, you know, I'm always your biggest fan, but this is the best of the 3 cars to drive. And again, this car, because of the color, totally unique. It's chassis number 375 of 375 cars. You'll see on all of these cars, you have the same color, but then you have also very similar interior to the F1 where it all started, which is the black Daytona style seats with the orange inserts on the seats. We then move on to this 675 LT Spider Carbon Edition. They made like 25 of these cars. I've never had one of these cars ever before. Actually, there's lots of cars in this collection, models that I've actually never owned before, I've never sold before, and I can't even believe I'm saying that actually, because I thought I bought and sold most things, especially all these modern supercars. But Carbon Edition Spider, chassis number at the end 7525, 25 meaning the 25th car built. There was only 25 cars built, and that's the last one. Delivery mileage. All of these cars that you see here are all delivery mileage. Hey, one of my picks of the collection, of which it's hard to take in all of the cars, and then if somebody said go away with one and it's not the McLaren F1, then it's probably this car, the MSO HS. Do you even know what an MSO HS is? These cars, 675 LT, phenomenal car to drive. Best value for money supercar that you can buy in the market today. And the MSO HS is basically that car on, is it fair to say that it's that car on steroids? It is that car to the extreme. So you take a normal McLaren 675, you up the brake horsepower, you put a roof scoop in as standard, and then you fix the rear wing that gives it so much more downforce. However, this rear wing just doesn't act for downforce. It even acts as an air brake, the same as a P1. It's a P1 inspired rear wing, acting as an air brake, giving more downforce. I haven't driven this car. I don't want to be the one to drive it because it's got delivery mileage, but I believe, and I'm told by McLaren, that this is the ultimate driver's car. Speaking of driver's cars, okay, McLaren driver's cars, that's two terminologies that definitely go hand in hand, but McLaren Senna. Now, I've actually never really been, when they was first launched, I was never a lover of the Senna. I think it's because at their launch event, I don't think McLaren showed the car in its best light. They didn't show it in a particularly good colour. And you'll actually see here that this car is the standout car in the collection that is very different. And you're like, well, how does that go with the Mansour Orange? Now, Mansour was an incredibly close friend to Ayrton and remained a close friend, not just through the years of him driving, but until we unfortunately lost Ayrton in 1994. And I am told by the family that Mansour said that he wanted to specify this car in a way that was obvious that he was inspired by Ayrton. And you can see that by these colours, these Brazilian colours, the colours of his helmet that's coming out on the specification of the car. Speaking of this specification, and you look at the naked carbon, the visible carbon bodywork, and you look at these yellow accents that look like it's giving you the vision of the paint being blown off by the speed of the car, and then, you know, the yellow calipers, the yellow painted center lock on the wheels, but even the smallest details. And this is where Mansour, you know, he's a guy that obviously had great taste and, you know, enjoyed the finer things in life. But when you look at the specification of this car and you see even the underside of the spoiler is painted in Ayrton's green, and you've got just a yellow dreamline on the edge of the spoiler and the green and the white here. You know, what a stunning spec car. Delivery mileage, the last, you'll see here, chassis number 500. Only 500 Sennas built. This is chassis number 500. Speaking of Sennas, do we have one in the collection? Do we have two in the collection? No, we actually have three in the collection. We've got this Senna LM, inspired by the McLaren F1 LM. You know, it's basically a Senna GTR, of which we have. Here's another car here, another Senna. It's a Senna GTR performance, but in a road specification. So a Senna GTR for the road, exactly like the McLaren F1 LM was. That was a McLaren F1 GTR for the road, of which they only made 5 examples. Today, they're like, you know, you just can't buy one. They're just packed away, and you'll probably never ever see one for sale. And, you know, the Senna GTR evolved into this car, and that's where the Senna LM come from. Speaking of Sennas, now this is not a Senna, but has a lot of Senna similarities under the skin. When I first saw this car, I wasn't sure what it was actually. It's a McLaren Saber. Now, a Saber is a bit like a myth in the modern supercar world. I've never seen a Saber. There was only supposedly 15 Sabers ever to be built. There was actually 16 cars built. Guess what? This is chassis number 16. All these cars were built for the US market, and they are basically under the skin. They have a Senna running gear, a Senna chassis, but it was a car that McLaren MSO, McLaren Special Operations, said, we will work with each one of these individual clients and they can have any extra that they want. There's no cost for any extra. And we want to build them a car that's absolutely, bespoke. It's like going back to the 1950s, the 1960s, where people can order very special features on their cars that you can no longer do in the modern car world. And when you look at the design of it and you see all of the aero, you see that the way it's designed for the aero to go in underneath these wings and come through the body. I think it's a beautiful car. The specification on this car as well is, it's got this naked carbon with the Mansour orange. But the more I walk around the car, the more I love it. I look at it and it's like an P1 car. It's got this rear fin, very similar design cue to the P1 cars. And then at the rear, and you look at all of these ventilation holes, and you look at all of the vents above the engine lid, and you see the exhaust coming out the back, and the rear diffuser this car is the Batmobile. A very valuable car, a car that was an expensive car to order new. These wing mirrors, the way that they were designed, the smallness of them, the neatness of them, McLaren could have never got homologated for the full worldwide market. It was only homologated for the US. I actually really like that car. A McLaren Senna running gear, but it's very much a car that was designed for a user to really drive and enjoy, whereas a Senna is very much a car for a user and owner to take around the track and enjoy around the track. Okay, take a breath, Tom. McLaren Speedtail. 106 cars built. This is chassis number 106, the very last example ever built. It's in Mansour orange. The interior this time doesn't have Daytona style seats, but it's got black leather with orange accents throughout the interior. Oh, I like these actually. So we've got two cars in. Okay, this car is the 720S Le Mans. Only 50 of these cars were ever built. These are cars that was built to celebrate McLaren's win at Le Mans in 1995. And when you look at the cars and you can see that the style of the wheels are the McLaren F1 GTR style wheels. This color is called Sarth Grey. And then we have the Wayno Clinic Grey on the rear sills, the color of the Le Mans winning car that still resides in McLaren today. And that brings me on to something else actually. You see all of these unbelievable cars here and you go, there is nothing missing. There actually is something missing. Mansour also had a McLaren P1 GTR that he was the only car in his collection that he was actively driving and using and enjoying and racing and taking part on track days in with his son Sultan. Where is that car? That car is proudly displayed on the boulevard in the McLaren Technology Centre. We debated on flying out to Bahrain to include it here today, but we couldn't get it out in time. But that does mean that we do have to cover it on the boulevard. And how special is that? The one car that is not here with the rest of them is a car that is being displayed by McLaren proudly on the boulevard. Now, going back to the Le Mans, so that's a 720S Le Mans, which we've never owned one before. Only 50 of those cars were ever built. And then we cross over, and this was the original 650S Le Mans. And again, delivery mileage, again, you'll see these all inspired by the F1 GTR, like the wing vents. You've got the Le Mans style wheels, you've got the Sarth grey colour over the Mansour orange. This was the last example built, last example of the 650S Le Mans, last example of the 720S Le Mans. We then go on to the 765LT. What's a 765LT? Well, of course, it's the successor of the 675LT. All of these LT, these long-tail cars from McLaren, are all phenomenal cars to drive. I think cars that are going to do so well in the future because, you know, I think they're the best of their type. Of all the cars that they compete with, the McLaren 675 for me is a better driving car than any similar lightweight Ferrari, and the 765, I'd have to say, the competing Ferraris again, I think the McLaren is a better driver's car. Only 765 of these cars were ever built. This car is chassis number 765. This is the coupe, chassis number 765 of the coupe. But across there, we also have the Spider. Only 765 Spiders were built, and that's exactly the same specification. We have it in Mansour orange, totally unique. There is no other Mansour orange cars ever produced by McLaren. That is exclusively his colour. Both of them delivery mileage, both of them last off the line. So this car is car number 765 of the coupes, and that car over there is car number 765 of the Spiders. We then move on to the 600LT. Again, we have a 600LT Spider, and across there we have a 600LT Coupe. Absolutely twins, sister cars, both finished in Mansour orange, both delivery mileage, both the last cars off the line. So this is the last Spider ever produced, of which there's a plaque in the middle that confirms by McLaren that this is the last 600LT Spider, and then that is the last 600LT Coupe ever produced. Okay, take a breath, Tom. Where are we at? We're going over the curb of Turn 1 at the Bahrain International Circuit. We have the Senna GTR that we touched on earlier. This Senna GTR, like all the other cars, the very last one ever produced. You can see here that Mansour had a slightly different idea with the design of this car. Obviously very fittingly, because it's a race car. Race cars normally have livery on them, and he split the Mansour orange paintwork with some black and with some naked carbon fibre. So you have a car that's very much Mansour orange and black, never used, never driven, never taken around the track until today when THJ drove it around the track. And not drove it around the track, drove it on the track. We then come to a 620R. I've never had one of these cars. Very rare car. This is the last car that was ever produced. This is basically the road-going version of the 570S GT4 car. 570S GT4 car. Is that a good driver's car? Well, it's the most successful GT car in McLaren's history. Think about that. That's how good of a car that is. In a contemporary race series, that car has won more races than any other GT car for McLaren in their whole history. And this is a road-going version of it. You look at the rear wing on the back, the snorkel, Mansour orange with the Saber style seats with the orange accents. I would like to be let loose on this car around this circuit, but I'm sure the Ojjeh family wouldn't be too happy if they heard that I was trying to put some lap times in on their car that has never been driven. Moving on to the next one. Now, we're definitely here at very much the track-inspired, race-inspired, or race car section of the collection. And this is the 650S CanAm car. 650S CanAm. Okay, summarize it. Only 50 cars were ever built. This is the last of the 50 in his traditional colors, in his traditional specification, never been used. Canadian American, that's what CanAm stands for. It is a race series that was humongous in the 1960s and 1970s. It's a race series that basically had very limited regulations by way of limitations. You could put any size engine, you could have the car as light as possible. So yet you would find cars back in that series in the late 1960s, early 1970s as something like 800 kilos and 800 or 900 brake horsepower, just insane. And unfortunately, that series actually cost Bruce McLaren his life. However, McLaren went on that year to win most of the races in that championship season. And this is a car that's inspired by it. So when you look at the wheels and the different design cues, and we've got the vents in the wings, and you've got the lightweight carbon fiber exposed bonnet, carbon fiber tonneau cover, carbon fiber rear spoiler. It's a very lightweight 650S, and I think a super collectible car for, not an insane amount of money of what the value of those cars are today. 675 LT, so that means we've got 2.5 675 LTs in the collection. We have a 675 LT Carbon Series Spider, of which only 25 were ever built, which we spoke about earlier. We have the MSO HS, which I think McLaren get highly offended if you call it a 675 LT. Only 25 of those cars were ever built, and they were basically, as we touched on, a 675 that was tweaked to be a little bit closer to a McLaren P1. And then we have the initial 675 LT Coupe. And this is just an extremely high spec car, delivery mileage, the very last one built. They made 500 coupes. Guess what? The chassis number of this car, 675 500. That's pretty cool. They made 500 675s, and the chassis number is 675 500. Now, all of Mansour's cars, they are specified such high spec cars. Forget about just the color and, the interior features. All of the cars, if we want to touch on brake calipers and additional carbon fiber and every possible extra that you can think of, just tick, 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 tick. So we've touched on just about all of the cars. We've got here the 600 LT Coupe, we've got the 765 LT Spider. Hey, we've got to have a look at this. Look at the gold exhaust tailpipes that are coming out. This is inspired by the F1 LM, the gold exhaust tailpipes that are coming out the back of this Senna LM. I never even noticed that actually until then. And we've spoken about the 765 LT Spider, we've spoken about the 720S Le Mans. As I mentioned, the only car in the collection that is not physically here with us today is the P1 GTR. That car is on the boulevard in the McLaren Technology Centre. I'm so excited and feel so privileged that the family has entrusted the sale of these cars to my business. It's a very special moment. It's a very special collection of cars that took one incredibly special individual basically more than a quarter of a century to assemble. And, we are offering this selection of McLaren road cars by one of the founders of the McLaren Automotive Group. Cars that he has owned from new, cars that he specified from new, and cars that are totally unique. There are no sister cars like them in the world. So it's a very special moment for us. We are looking forward to seeing how the sale goes. We would love the collection to stay together. That would be our goal, but let's see what happens.